It's the three amigos tonight.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is now 5:30, and I call the work session of the Burnsville City Council to order. The city clerk will note that for the record, that Mayor Couch is out of town, and I am sitting as the acting mayor for this matter. And the only item on tonight is the presentation on the proposed 2018 budget and capital improvement plan. And Steve Albrecht, I think you're beginning.
I think Kelly will maybe say a couple opening words, and then I'll take over for a little bit. So,
Okay. Yep, I have just a brief overview of where we've been with the budget process. On November 14th, we went over the most of the funds of the five-year financial plans, actually all of the funds, I believe, and policies and fees and charges. And so tonight we'll be talking about the capital improvements plan, debt service fund, and tax increment funds, and then any previous meeting follow-up that we have. So I'll turn it over to Steve.
Mr. Acting Mayor, members of the council, I'll be handling the capital portion, and then I'll phase into the debt portion with Kelly and let her take it from there. So certainly if you have questions, let us know along the way. We'll go through this. You've all been through this several times, so we'll go through this fairly quickly. But our capital improvement program for our audience is a 5-year plan that details the different infrastructure improvements that we have planned in the city. Now, in each of our infrastructure categories that we'll talk about, we have 20-year plans that exist outside of this document that are our working plans that have detailed replacement programs for all of our infrastructure. But 5-year has much more certainty, and the city uses 5-year for budgeting purposes up front. But when we set our rates and our long-term plans, those are based on much longer plans than the 5-year window. So for our public. So moving first, our Public Works Capital Improvement Program, or the CIP as we refer to it. We have our street projects, our collector and thoroughfare projects, which are our county road projects typically. And then we'll have intersection improvements, which are our traffic signals for the most part. We have 60-plus traffic signals in town. We have our street lighting system, our water system, sanitary sewer system, and the stormwater management system. So we'll hit on all of these capital plans over the next hour. The other capital plans.
Steve, could you
Councilmember
flip back
Keeley?
to that last slide? Could you explain what that project is going on at Crystal Lake Park?
Sure, we like to have some different projects. This is the Keller Lake Water Quality Project located next to Crystal Lake. And what this does is it pre-treats water coming off the street system before it goes into Keller Lake. And this is one of our water quality projects. And now if you drive out to that park, you wouldn't know it was ever there, but this is an aerial shot of that project this last summer when it was still torn up. So that's what's on that slide.
Massive.
And that's a project from our stormwater management plan.
What's a big underground that?
Yep, it's an underground detention chamber so that we can retain water and settle phosphorus and improve water quality discharging the lakes. Improvements like this one are key improvements in the water quality stuff that we'll talk about in a few minutes in the stormwater plan.
Cool. Thank you.
So the other plans that we will talk about today also, we have the Parks Capital Improvement Plan, the Vehicle and Equipment Plan Facilities, the IT, Ice Center, Golf, and AIM Center plans also. So starting with our Public Works Street and Utility CIP, we have $71.5 million over the next 5 years. 18.8 of that is in 2018. And I think it's important for everyone to understand this is the plan. Every project in this plan, before it ever comes to fruition, has several other steps and council approvals that are required. So just because a project is in this document does not mean that it is going to happen exactly as planned, but we are programming it, we're planning for the project, but the council will review it in detail and go through a design and bidding process on all of those along the way. So the first thing we have here is a chart just to show the $71.5 million over the 5-year period. This shows the different places that money is being invested. You can see in 2018 we have a large portion of that money is going to our street programs, which are reconstruction, rehabilitation, the thoroughfare, and the different intersection improvements. And then another large chunk going to the utility improvements. And it's a little tough to see in there, but the green then would be the stormwater improvements. And some of the smaller slivers are, like I mentioned, the collector and thoroughfare and intersection. Streets is the first one that we'll jump into. Looking at our street projects, we have $50 million worth of street projects over the 5-year period. This shows kind of the breadth of those projects. Our collector and thoroughfare and host community grant projects, we do program the projects from the grant money that we receive from the state. Those projects are concentrated typically in the MRQ or the heart of the city area, and they're road-related projects. Our intersection projects, those are our traffic signals, so just for quick reference. And then our overlays, road rehabilitation, and multimodal, those are kind of our roadway maintenance projects. And then we have our recon and rehab, which is our largest section of projects. The street projects funding sources, our infrastructure trust fund, that's what ITF stands for, and then MSAS is our municipal state aid system. The city does receive money from the state of Minnesota for maintenance of our roadways, a portion of our roadways. It's money we receive for about 20% of our roadway system. We will receive about $1.9 million from the state in 2018 to go towards road projects, and roughly another $500,000 to $600,000 goes towards maintenance of those roadways. And
Just a quick question for the audience, and the MSA funds come from the state,
yes,
which comes from taxes collected
correct.
through what?
Your gas tax, motor sales, and your vehicle registration tabs. So those 3 pots of money are collected by the state and apportioned to different programs. MnDOT, what's called county state aid system, and the municipal state aid system. So, and then we receive a piece of the money for the cities based on the mileage of roads that we have in our population. We get a prorated share of that money.
Thank you.
You'll see on this graph, this is important for people to understand, because sometimes they don't realize it isn't just when we're doing a street project. You can see that blue section. Utilities oftentimes make up a huge portion of the cost of a street project. And so while on the surface the street may look a certain way, we also have to take in consideration the water main, sanitary sewer, and the subsurface utilities, and understand that those have huge costs associated with them too. So it's somewhat of a balancing act to get our utility projects coordinated with our street projects. And there are times where people don't understand why we can't do a certain street. It may be because we have such large utility improvements to do under the surface, we have to put it off for a year or two until we have sufficient funding available to do the utility improvements. Not always easy to understand when you see the condition of the surface of the street, but it's a reality. Looking at our 2018 street projects, we have our street rehabilitation program and reconstruction program. The rehabilitation is when we are doing the upper couple inches of the surface of Burnsville Parkway, Nicollet Avenue. Those larger streets are typically rehabilitation projects. You'll see we have about $860,000 for that. And then we've got the reconstruction program, which is really our neighborhood project, where we're rebuilding our roadway network in our neighborhood, in our industrial and commercial areas. They'd be our non-collector streets for the most part. And you can see we're spending a significant amount of money in 2018, $8.8 million in 2018. And then our maintenance overlays, we don't do those every year. We do them every other year in the program, but what the council has done strategically the last couple of years is if we get good bids, the council has rolled that money in and picked away at roadway projects that are on our list for overlay. And so this year we were able to do some additional neighborhood streets with maintenance overlays with the savings you had from your reconstruction program. And so the council doesn't sit on that money, they reinvest it, because when we get good prices, it's usually prudent to put it back into street construction because prices are low and we've got contractors in town. Intersection improvements. This is our city-county traffic signal projects. For the most part, in 2018, we have about $220,000 dedicated to some county signals. You'll basically see a county signal every year for the next several years. We have roughly 30 or 25 county signals in the city of Burnsville, and county signals are not all funded by the county, unfortunately. The city pays for each leg that we have associated with those, so we always have a cost share in those. We have approximately another 20 signals that are MnDOT and city-owned, and then another 23 signals that are solely the responsibility of the city of Burnsville. And so every year we're doing some level of signal replacement in town, and based on the age of Burnsville, 1960s, 1970s, early 80s development, a lot of our signals are nearing replacement life on them. And then street lighting, annually the city of Burnsville will do about $170,000 worth of street lighting improvements throughout town. That means replacing lights in neighborhood areas, installing new LED systems on our collector roadways, or replacing intersection lights. Future projects. Another piece of the program, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, is the Cliff Road project. We call it the Cliff Road Interchange Freight Improvement Project. This is a project that's been on the city's radar for many years in the MRQ to improve the ramp situation at the 35W southbound ramp. Anyone who's ever tried to get on and off of West Cliff at certain times of the day, we're not talking 20, 30 seconds of delay. You could be talking 5 to 10 minutes of delay. And from a commerce standpoint and an access standpoint, that's significant to that area. So the city does have a project identified for that area. However, it's contingent on receiving grants. And we'll talk about the next project. Both of these projects are contingent on the city receiving federal grants to help pay for about 80% of the projects. We wouldn't undertake them otherwise at this time. And so the Cliff Road project is the first one. The second one is the Nicollet Avenue 13 pedestrian bridge project we talked about earlier this year. A couple of things. One of the directions from the council was we wanted to be able to report back what would that impact in our capital improvement program were we to include that project, remembering that the city's share of that project could be up to $750,000 depending on what type of bridge and what we were looking at locating there. A couple of things. Number one, the county has included the project in their capital improvement program, so they have an equal matching amount of $750,000 shown. So the local funding with the city and the county would be in place, and this project is eligible for federal funding for the remainder of the project. And so, but that $750,000 were the council not to do a bridge project, that would go to our collector and thoroughfare category most likely, maybe a rehabilitation. The money that we would be using for this project is part of the state aid, or the MSAS money we talked about. That money is earmarked in that it can only be used on certain roadways of certain, basically our larger streets. It can't be used in neighborhood streets. The state gives it to you to help pay for what they would say is trips and travelers from outside your community that are using your roads and wearing on your roads, is essentially the philosophy behind that. So it is eligible for that. So that's what that money would be coming from. Were we not to do the project, again, we would use it towards an intersection improvement signal or something of that nature most likely. At this time, you'll see it's shown out at 2021, 2022. The council, including in the CIP, doesn't commit you to the project long term. What it would allow us to do, and we'll talk about in a second, is to apply for grant funding to see if we could get that 80% dollars to help with that project. And so these projects are in the CIP at this time, and so we wanted to make sure we highlighted that because they haven't both been in the CIP. They've both been kind of in and out of it over the years as grant funding has been available. Utilities CIP. Our utilities CIP, we're going to talk about our water system, our sanitary sewer system, and our stormwater system. The water system, big things, I think you're aware, we're in the process of replacing our meters. We are, Dana, 11,000 meters approximately done?
Approximately 11,000, 65% complete, something about that.
So the city's making very good progress. Early next year, by summer, we should have all of our meters changed out, and that's over 16,000 meters that will have been done. But part of the funding for that project is in 2018, which is why it's shown in the CIP. And then we also have system rehabilitation. Those are different water system pump rehabilitations, well rehabilitations, things of that nature. We have our groundwater plant repair. That's the other significant piece next year. That's over a 2-year period. We started that project now. And so we're in the process of completing the first phase of that project in 2017, and then 2018 we'll be finishing that project up. And then our street reconstruction and rehabilitation. As you saw in those earlier slides with streets, that big chunk of utilities money, you can see in 2018 we've got $2.5 million identified to go into our street program to replace water mains and fix sanitary sewers as we move forward. But water main is what the $2.5 million is in this case. Sanitary sewer system management. The city has 14 lift stations in town, and lift stations help us in areas where the sewage can't flow by gravity to the Met Council. We pump it up to a high point, and then it can flow by gravity to the Met Council. And so we have 14 of those that we maintain. Over the 2019 to 2022 period, we're going to spend about $1.3 million. We typically do one of those about every other year. You may have noted right near the post office off of McAndrews, you've seen a project on that corner for the last several months. We rehabilitated both a sanitary lift station and a stormwater lift station in that location. We actually have 2 of them in that location. So if you get questions about that, that's what's been going on in that location. And then our sanitary sewer rehabilitation, this is when we line our pipes. A lot of our pipes in town are old vitrified clay pipe, and so what we'll do is we'll actually essentially put a new pipe within that, and we do that by lining the pipes. We don't have to dig them up. It's a very efficient way to rehabilitate our sanitary sewer. And then you'll see in our street reconstruction, we will also do some lining and different rehabilitation things with the street reconstruction program. We always want to make sure before we put a new street down that the utilities are in good shape, and part of that is making sure the sanitary sewer is also ready to go before we complete a street project. Stormwater management. The lateral drainage modifications, kind of a confusing name. This program has been in existence since the 80s, and this program is very successful in that it targets drainage improvements throughout the community, both on public and private property that have impacts to public property, and started by our former city manager when he was city engineer back in the 80s. This program has dealt with many of the drainage issues that we have in town, and that's why when we do have big storms in Burnsville, for the most part, we're fairly resilient because the city has been, over the last 30 years, knocking those projects off a list, and that's what that local drainage modifications is. The pond cleanout program, you have a strategic program where we have 100+ ponds in town that we go in and clean. The ones that give us the best bang for the buck, I'll say, and we utilize that funding for pond cleanouts. You'll see in 2018 we have about $330,000. Street reconstruction and rehabilitation, again, as part of our street projects. Those streets were built in the 60s and 70s. Mother Nature is changed since then in that a lot of the rainfalls that those streets were designed for to handle stormwater-wise, we now know that we get bigger and more frequent storms, and so as we do those projects, we'll take advantage of upsizing storm sewer or replacing storm sewer to make sure when the street's done that the storm sewer can handle things moving forward too if we're going to try to get 40 to 50 years out of that roadway. And you'll see we've got $500,000 roughly in 2018 for that program too. Stormwater management continued. This is a large category. Lift station rehabilitation. We do have stormwater lift stations also. We have areas in town where if we didn't have stormwater lift stations, eventually we'd have flooding of private property. Resiliency assessment of our major drainage systems. This is a new program. We are a bluff community, and we have some erosion issues in our bluff areas running down to the Minnesota River. This is one of our new programs looking at identifying and prioritizing some of those drainage systems that convey water down the bluff. You'll recall several years ago, Black Dog Park, we had a large storm and the hillside slid down into the park and cost the city several $100,000. This program is aimed at identifying any of those slopes and those drainage areas ahead of time so that we can be prepared and not have that, be much more proactive than reactionary to those types of issues. And then our stormwater system asset management risk analysis. What that's dealing with is identifying in our stormwater system, our ponds and our different pipes, what are the areas we need to be paying the most attention to and prioritizing with improvements. We always want to spend the money where it's going to provide the greatest protection and benefit to our public and not necessarily be spending it on areas where maybe a pipe's old, but if something happens to that pipe, it's really a low risk to the city, and so that's what that program's for. Park drainage improvements. Every year we do miscellaneous improvements throughout our 76 parks in town, and so in 2018 you'll see that we've got improvements both at Neal and Alley Magnet. Anyone familiar with Alley Magnet Dog Park and the softball area knows that it is subject to periodic flooding, and so we're hopeful with those with that project that we will eliminate those frequent flooding issues that we've had at that park. Stormwater management, other highlights, the ravine restoration. Once we do that resiliency study, that'll identify for us what are the key ravines along the River Bluff area that need to be restored. And then we also have future water quality improvement money. That Keller Lake project that you highlighted at the very beginning was one of those future water quality improvement projects, and those get targeted once we identify the amount of phosphorus or something that we need to take out of a lake. And it's been a very successful program. I think the public's aware, but we expect next year that Crystal Lake will come off the impaired waters list. That'll be the second water body in the last 7 years that the city will have removed from the impaired waters list. That's great credit to the council and your commitment to investment. The people that live on that lake, that's a positive property value improvement to not have your lake be on a impaired water list. And so that's a great thing. The other great thing about this fund, you saw a large number of projects. We're looking at a 1%, 1.5% increase on rates for this fund. This fund has been at 0 or 1% for the last several years. We've got a very long-term vision on this. The council's been diligent in your investment, and so that's allowed some really good rate stability that really is only responding to some construction cost increase and materials increases. And so that's some good news for our ratepayers on the water quality side of things. Capital funds. Jumping to our Parks Capital Fund and equipment and facilities and IT. Parks Capital Fund, again, this is dealing with our 76 parks in town. We've got park improvements next year. Those park improvements are additional items that we're adding to our park system. So they could be a new trail portion, a local trail portion, a new basketball court or something. A lot of little miscellaneous projects, but you'll see over 76 parks, we really don't spend a lot on improvements. The next line, park renovation, that's the kind of construction of our existing parks. That's where most of our money goes. With the exception of some trail improvements in your CIP, we're really not building new parks. We're renovating our existing parks. And when we renovate them, our Recreation and Parks Department, as part of the Comprehensive Parks Plan, they'll be looking at how should those parks evolve? What are the amenities that we'll provide now that might be different than the 1980s when many of the parks were built? So you'll see the park renovation money, and then you'll see trail system development. You've got the $0.9 million in 2018. That's for the Rose Bluff Trail. So that'll connect Williams Drive down to Sue Fisher Park. And then kind of the next piece of that is the Keller Park Lake Marion Regional Trailhead, which will take that piece from Williams that you will be able to get to to Sunset Pond Park. From Sunset Pond Park, you'll now be able to eventually get down to Lake Marion Regional Trailhead and down into Scott County and Lakeville. And you're aware we received, I think it's a $1.7 million grant from the federal government to build that trail system. And that project will commence in 2019. We've already been meeting with property owners. Some of you are aware as we try to plan out that trail as it goes under the railroad tracks under 42 and then heads south past the UTC property and down towards Lake Marion and Keller Park. So big trail project, again, still in the planning process, but you'll note that these federal funds are a key funding source for our trail projects. We have a partner in Dakota County, but without federal dollars, we wouldn't be doing these large trail projects. And the other piece is it's the #1 demanded amenity by our public right now. They want more trails, they want more opportunities for trails. Equipment and Vehicle Fund. I'll run through it quickly, and then maybe I'll let Kelly add if she wants to, just on the stability of this fund. You'll note next year we've got some fire equipment and vehicles. Typically with fire, that's going to be our trucks and our ambulances. I believe that's an ambulance that we have, and so our fire equipment, we don't have a lot of vehicles, but they are expensive when we do have to replace them. Parks equipment and vehicles, that's going to be mowers and pickup trucks typically. Our police equipment and vehicles. The main piece with police is our squads. We replace on average 5 squads a year. Our squads, we get about 100,000 miles out of them before we rotate them out. And so we do roughly 5 of those a year. And so most of the money you'll see is for those and then some additional investigative vehicles. But our police vehicles, for the most part, the squads aren't cheap, but compared to some of our other divisions, the vehicles themselves aren't nearly as expensive.
Just a quick question. On average, how long does it take for a squad to put 100,000 miles on?
Well, we're on a 5-year cycle basically with how we're rotating those out of there.
Right.
So
Is it about 5 years? You said
Yeah.
like 5.
So it depends.
vehicles
So
go, and then you
one of
get
the
5
things with
more.
our new fleet system is it will allow our police department to better balance use of the vehicles. The other thing we have going too is we still are transitioning from to going to the Ford sport utilities. Now that we're there, we'll get much more even use. When we still had a few of the Crown Victoria squads, you can imagine that's not the favorite vehicle in the winter, so those would get less miles than, say, an all-wheel drive vehicle. So you're going to see 20 to 30,000 miles a year typically on a squad if we're using them all equally. And so that's typically at 100,000 miles, you're going to be in that 5-year range for cycling.
Okay, thank you.
Street equipment vehicles, typically for the street department, it's going to be the large plow trucks and dump trucks. Those are the main street vehicles that you're going to see. So I believe we have 2 of them in 2018. And then equipment, all the other equipment and vehicles, that's the remainder of all the other departments in the city, not a significant amount of money, about 102,000. So you can see between those 4 bigger divisions, that's where you're going to see most of the equipment spending. I don't know if you wanted to add to that,
I
Kelly.
think the only thing I have to add to that is you saw the 5-year financial plans last meeting for all of these funds, and the vehicles, much like all the other capital funds, are run much longer than 5-year plans behind the scenes. So they're spreading out those large vehicles and fitting those in so that we can keep the peaks and valleys on the spending in that area. And then they're always evaluating too how long so each of those vehicles can last. And as each year goes, it gets updated, and they look at each specific vehicle. And I think that the SUVs, the new ones too, they will be evaluating whether 100,000 or how they're holding up. It's based on what kinds of repairs and maintenance costs are happening with those vehicles, as well as something we don't know until we get through some of them. So that's one thing to consider. And this fund is one that we run very tight on the fund balance on this one. It's been one we've been watching and making sure we're trying to keep within that, but it's been one that has a struggle. It is positive in the in all the fund balances of those years, but that is something to keep in mind.
And I'll add one additional comment on the squads. It's based on our history with them. So 5 years is where we start to see a lot of mechanical issues where it starts to cost us more to keep the vehicle than to dispose of it. And different than our Crown Victorias, which tended to, if it was 70,000 mile or 120,000, we typically get $6,000 for it. We're seeing, or less, we're seeing with these sport utilities, we'll get a higher rate of return on the trade-in on them. They're not significantly more expensive on the front end, but we'll see on the average of $5,000 to $7,000 more on the back end. We're trying to figure out, that'll take a little bit of cycling through what's the proper year to maximize our value and minimize our investment in keeping it. So you may see that change a little. It could be 4.5 years, it could be 6.5 years, depending on. And I think the other thing we'll see too is next winter, those vehicles will be indoors for the first time too. So we'll see, remembering that the significant piece there is those vehicles right now have to idle in the wintertime continuously. And so while they're not super expensive vehicles, their engine life may be extended significantly if all of a sudden they're not idling all the time when our officers are inside doing reports. They can leave them in the heated garage and turn their vehicles off and not have to keep their equipment warm. So that'll be another piece too that might allow us to, and I think our police believe would potentially allow us to extend them maybe up to a year per vehicle. So those things will all be monitored as we move forward, and that is one of the benefits of the garage facility.
Question on the type of vehicle. With the, one of the things I was just saying, your comment about the engine, basically the moving parts that wear out, and these are, Ford American-made vehicles. They're basically the same truck that we could go buy, although they probably have a little beefier engine and a few other things, but it's not like they're made of thicker steel or thicker aluminum or a thicker chassis, like some of the, more heavy-duty vehicles, trucks, and or the fire equipment, which might last for many, 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 many years, being taken care of. They're really a slightly modified, passenger vehicle.
They're
right?
an upgraded Ford Explorer.
Yeah,
Essentially,
upgraded
they do
Explorer.
have upgraded crash stability. They do have some upgraded crash features, and they do have heavier duty brakes and different things
Right.
in them that allow
But
them to be.
ultimately, yeah,
Yep.
they're moving parts
But ultimately,
that
it's
wear out, rust,
it's like a
and
special
break
edition
down and-
Explorer, essentially.
Yeah,
Yep.
and so with the, and you mentioned it with like the idling and all that, there's I'm curious if you're seeing at the municipal level, options for future vehicles like this. That could be city vehicles too. I mean, the inspections vehicles as well. Getting into more options with cars that are, that they don't really idle. Like when you come to a stop, they shut down, and then as soon as you let off the brake and touch the accelerator, they start right back up again. So this instant start and instant on and off for fuel savings, but it's also wear and tear on the engine. I know 20, 30 years ago, it was like you didn't want to keep stopping and starting because there was a lot of fuel consumption to start the car back up. And they've now perfected that where you're getting fuel savings and mechanical wear and tear savings. So are those types of vehicles becoming options for police or inspections or any municipality use where they've got some of that eco savings, fuel savings, and wear and tear savings with that sort of technology?
Not so much for police yet, but you will see, I would say within the next year, we will have fully electric vehicles within our inspection fleet. And the reason that's an enhancement is right now we run Priuses, which are very good vehicles. However, they have a gas engine and an electrical system. And what we find is when you don't run a lot of mileage on those vehicles, that is very difficult on the gas combustion systems because they just don't run a lot. Right. And there's a lot of maintenance and upkeep associated with that. And we all know that gas engines, if not run, it's almost worse for them than running them. And so we are looking at potentially all electric vehicles because the costs are at a point now where it's the same. And the type of mileage an inspector may drive 25 miles a day. Well, if you look at electric vehicles, 100 miles or less a day is the perfect range for that. So I would expect that you'll see fully electric vehicles in our fleet within the next year, and that'll start to expand. There will be more options with some of the larger vehicles at some point. There's different, there's compressed gas. There's some different technologies out there that are coming our way, but I think certainly on the inspection fleet and the city hall fleet, you're going to see a rise in the fully electric soon. So.
Cool. Thank you.
Councilmember Guston.
I know Dakota Electric does rebates on a lot of the electric cars out there. Would we be eligible as a city to?
There's actually federal rebates on them right now, so that's why we're looking at different, and the rebates are, I don't want to get complicated, but they're based on the number of vehicles that a certain auto manufacturer sells. The more they sell, the less the rebate goes down on those. It's actually a rebate to us on to a private buyer. It's on their taxes. It's actually a tax deduction they can claim or credit, I guess. So it's a little different for municipalities how that works, but they're making them much more desirable. And the bigger issue is they charge quicker now and even on just a regular plug-in, just the same plugins that if you'll notice, the other piece we have is our whole front lot is wired for winter vehicles. And so now all of a sudden you go away from winter vehicle to just an electric vehicle, the plugs are already there. So we have some synergies there and opportunities at a municipal level. I think that'll make some sense. That's why you're going to see them sooner than later.
One more follow-up. Do we have plans at all to have some electric charging stations throughout the city at some point?
So your Heart of the City project that you approved, I believe, at the last meeting or the preliminary report for is one of the amenities looking at in our Heart of the City would be some city-owned charging stations down there. Dakota County has charging stations in some of their parks. They've given us some good feedback on what the value of charging for the charging stations is versus just putting them in and having them free, because they actually are more money. They lose less money if they just have it free and they look at it generating the public, because the systems are pretty expensive to put in when you have to deal with credit cards and the money processing. And when they look at the amount of money they make up front for that capital investment, it's more affordable to put them in as free. The other thing they see is that these stations, if placed in the right areas, Burnsville Mall, Heart of the City, people literally plan their trips around, hey, I can stop for lunch here and I can charge my vehicle. And they're boons to restaurant areas because people will plan to go to lunch and charge their vehicle. So that's the type of planning we're starting to do with the sustainability group. We're looking strategically downtown to look at a couple of options in the heart of the city, and then we'll expand that throughout the city. UTC has already inquired. They have charging stations for their employees. They'd like to look at more, and maybe some in the public parks and things like that. So there's conversations about that expanding. With our street lighting system, it does give us the opportunities to tap into systems in different places. So that'll be another thing that'll be happening in earnest here.
Good.
And moving on to the facilities fund. You'll see here, you're familiar with most of these projects. Obviously, we get the city hall and police station. and we've got the Civic Center garage. We've got the different improvements are identified in the capital improvement program. You're obviously undertaking a massive investment this year in the City Hall and Police Station. Much more minor investments related to the older city portion of City Hall in the next year, and then Civic Center or the city garage. Which is the old garage or the garage. We've got some improvement stuff to be done there. The fire stations, we have some improvements that need to be done there. And then Phase 2 construction is also noted. That's your Phase 2, $11.9 million for Fire Station 1. We still don't know what that project is yet exactly as we look at the existing site or a different location for that facility. And then the maintenance facility has some maintenance investments in 2018, and then our parking lots and deck. We also have some maintenance. Also, now when we're talking parking lots and deck, that's all the parking lots the city has in town and the deck and the parking ramp. So really not that big of an investment for all the parking facilities that we have in town.
The big one in City Hall with the police is really coming together. Looking forward to our tour that's coming up, I think, soon to see the progress, but pretty exciting. I think all kinds of reasons why we chose to do that, and I'm very glad we did. Not only savings potentially on wear and tear on automobiles, but storing high-tech equipment, safety, etc. The list is very long, but I'm thrilled we did it and can't wait till that opens. I'm sure there's some law enforcement officers that are all equally excited, if not more so, when the facility opens and they'll be able to check their equipment indoors.
I think quality of workplace too for our police.
Absolutely.
Above all, they will have a good facility to do what they need to do,
Yes.
which they haven't had for a while. So I think that's going to be the biggest.
For the next 30 years, right?
Yes,
The last
exactly.
one took about 30 years, probably wore out of it, grew out of it maybe 10 years ago, but hopefully this one will provide that facility for more than that.
IT Capital Fund. Dan, do you want to say anything about that?
I can do it, sure I can. The IT Capital Fund, this is, think about the hardware, the physical stuff that you can see, that you can touch. That's what's in this capital fund. We went through it a couple weeks ago, but here are some of the specifics. In your books, there's a lot more detail, but for the purposes of this slide and to keep it simple, we just kind of grouped everything together. So you'll see non-public safety systems and software, and then public safety systems and software. The non-public safety, that's things like the systems and software that we purchase that allows the staff to deliver the services to the public. Think like your recreation software. The recreation system allows people to register online or track those registrations for the different Parks and Recs programs that we have. Our online permitting or our permitting system. IT infrastructure and security. We're constantly looking at improving or adding to our system to enhance our security. That's the physical security, gates, cameras, building security, and then the IT infrastructure, which are your servers, your cabling, your hardware, and then our PC computers. We rotate those routinely. Every 3 years, the departments will look at it. That seems to be the life of what we're able to get. We keep the monitors longer, 8 to 10 years out of the monitors. But those PCs are rotated 3 years for the most part.
And so that concludes the discussion on the specifics of the capital improvement plans. There are more specifics, as Dana noted, in the budget document, the 2018 budget document, which can be found on burnsville.org as well. But from pages 121 through 154, much more specifics on each of those projects. And then also how they fit into the 5-year capital plans, those are in the finance plans in 2018.
Quick question.
Yeah.
I believe noted in a prior meeting, we're getting this is software primarily, so it's not necessarily a capital, but there's a lot of cost that goes in it. An overhaul of the city's website, was that going to happen in 2018?
It is in, if I can, it is in the 2018 budget under communications. It would fall under the communications department. if it were to be, and I don't know what the cost is of it off the top of my head, I think the budgeted number is somewhere between 60 and 80,000. I can look that up. But the rule of thumb is as we talked about in a previous meeting, it's been a good 10, 11, 12 years since we've done any major upgrade. The rule of thumb is usually about every 3 to 5 years you want to be doing that. So there are plans to engage the public, to engage the staff in some focus groups or surveys to really see what it is people are looking for, how people use websites, the tools that are available are a lot different than when we did this initially, so I think there's a lot of improvements to come out of that. One example is our searchability. One complaint that we do receive a lot is that it's really hard to find things using the search tool on our website. Those search engines have really come a long way, and so we do expect to see some improvements with that as well.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Moving on to talk about the financing of these projects. This capital is very long-term items, larger items. So when we look at financing these and building them into the finance plans, we've got a PAYGO portion and a bonded portion. So just wanted to go through a little bit of a definition, because sometimes we use those terms. PAYGO, what is that? PAYGO is really paying cash. It's using current funding, current property taxes or other funding sources to pay for things, or funds that we have saved up. That avoids interest costs, but there are also good reasons for using bonding when we're looking at bigger projects or projects whose funding sources are coming in over time, say special assessments. When we do a road project, we do special assessments to the property owners, and we give them time to pay, so we also then have to fund that particular project by issuing bonds for that. So that is actually sort of this slide as well. What I was just talking about, why we would issue debt would be special assessments or some other kind of private funding that's coming in over time. And when PAYGO funding's not available, so when it's not possible to, we need to spread the tax levy over a number of years, and that would be like for the facilities fund. Pardon me. And then also you're aligning the payment of the asset with the use of the asset. For instance, a building, if you save up all of your money and you're charging current users for a building that's in the future, rather if you issue bonds, you're charging the current users of the building for the use of the building. So long-term assets, facilities construction, large CIP process, or some projects, or when we want to accelerate a project and do that faster than what we can use PAYGO for. We haven't issued for capital equipment in a very long time. We haven't issued debt. We've used PAYGO funding because as we were talking about that equipment and vehicle fund, we're spreading that out over a number of years and trying to take that peaks and valleys out of the planning. But if you had a year where we needed to replace fire engines or things that are much larger, we might issue capital debt, but we don't have any of that right now. And then refunding, we look at refundings every year. What debt is existing that has reached its call date? So when we issue debt, we put a call date in there, so the debt might be 10 to 15 years, but we'll put a call date somewhere in the middle in the bond where we can then refund that, call those bonds and issue new bonds at lower rates to refund those, and we have interest savings. And you've seen that pretty frequently in the last few years when we've had very low interest rates. So we strive to maintain PAYGO funding as much as possible. We have there are state limits on how much debt we can issue. Our city limit is much more restrictive than what we could do. So, and then we also look at repayment terms not exceeding the life of the asset that it's funding. So we're being very strategic in how we're issuing that debt, and we're not also issuing debt to fund current operations. So it's only things that have a long-term portion to them. This is what the outstanding debt looks like at the end of 2017. You can see a large portion of it is in the utility funds. Because we have issued we've done a lot of big projects in the utility funds that are future related projects. And then the Ames Center is 20% of the debt, and the new facilities, police facilities, 14%. Our special assessment projects, 16%. This is just a historical, along with the projected future debt balances by type. So you can see in 2017 we increased, and that is mainly our new facility, police facility. The debt service payments. This graph is showing you what tax levies are funding debt service. So you have in the first column the debt service levy. It's about $1.1 million that is going to those different types of projects. We also have a portion of the ITF fund levy that funds some bonds that were issued in the year 2010 when we were balancing cutbacks with the recession. So we had 1 year where we bonded for that. So we're using levy to do that. And the abatement levy and the EDA levy, those portions also go to fund the Ames Center.
Councilmember Keeley.
Could you go back one slide?
Yep.
The test strip slide. In 2017, I noticed it wasn't only the facilities, but the utility funds are quite a bit bigger than prior years, and even go back to 2008, they're about 3 times larger than 2008, and they continue very large through the future. What is the...
Our meter replacement project, it came online, and the water plant. So the ones we just issued debt for, which is the project that's just starting in 2017, will be completed in 2018.
Gotcha.
So
65% done.
Well,
Meter.
yeah, 65%. So, and I see in 2022, the projection is a slight reduction, but very, very slight, still fairly substantial amount of debt related to that area, which will obviously take over time to, pay it down.
Right.
And our goal long-term is to wean the city off of utility bond debt. It's going to take a little while because we're still replacing so much water main as we do projects. We have a significant capital, so when we have to do these larger capital projects, bonding is really the only option the city has to fund those. And we have a consistent source, and as Kelly touched on, not having the current payer always pay for some of these long-term improvements makes some sense. But the finance staff has been working with Public Works on identifying kind of a light at the end of the tunnel to get us to minimal bonding long-term with the rates that you have, and capping the rates that you have and trying to get to that point, because we don't want to continue to grow that debt and have that fund, those rates being collected just to pay debt service. That's not our goal. Long-term, we want to get off of that. Stormwater fund, there was some debt issued, I think, in 2010 or something of that nature, but we haven't issued debt since then. We don't plan to. None of those other capital funds are issuing debt, so our goal would get to utility fund in the same place in several years.
In a position where you're basically paying as you go.
Yep. And we see
carrying a balance.
the water main
Good.
replacement of the cast iron water mains we're replacing around 2030. We will be pulling out of having to do those. And now all of a sudden you've got water mains, you got a 50-year gap between replacing water mains. That combined with these large capital projects coming off the books right about then, that's where we see kind of the light at the end of the tunnel is in the late 2020s on the debt for this fund.
Good plan.
There were also some years prior to that, 2008, where the rates went up very significantly for a number of years and used more current funding to fund some projects during that time. So that was a very low period in issuing. So the rates have maintained around 4.5% to 5% increases over the last several years. And that if we had factored in more current payments on those, we would be seeing much larger rate increases in the water and sewer fund in order to do that.
Thank you.
This slide is to show you kind of where we fit in with our other Dakota County cities as far as the amount of outstanding debt to tax capacity. So you can see that we're on the low side of comparisons. So what do we have proposed? Big things coming up that are, we have our normal special assessment portions of the projects that we're doing annually. But in 2022 is phase 2 of the facilities study, the Fire Station 1. And then the utilities that we were just talking about, those are the other areas. There are some ice arena improvements in 2018, the roof replacement and some bleacher and access issues within Rink 1 that we will probably need to issue debt or have some kind of funding sources looking at that, so, in this next year. This just shows you graphically that same information, so you can see the big year is in 2022 when we would be doing Fire Station 1. This chart shows you what is new each year in for the next 5 years compared to existing debt. So the darker green, I know it's a slight difference, but the darker green is what is existing today. So what debt we've already issued, how that balance is, you can see being paid down. So as we're paying that down, we issue new debt, and then that becomes in the following year existing debt. So that's the lighter green. So you can see that the new debt is kind of filling in where the existing debt is. So until we get to 2022, when we pop up back again with the Fire Station 1.
Well, clarification, in the lighter shade of green,
Yeah.
it reflects new debt, but from prior years. So is you're saying it's accumulating,
So
it's really new debt, but not just that year, it's new debt that year plus whatever has been added in prior years, which makes that lighter green get bigger and bigger.
in 2018, you can see we have some blue there that is the new debt. In 2019, that becomes existing debt from 2018. So the lighter green is moving down to existing debt. So you can
so-
see the blue and the purple and that gray. That's the debt issued in that year, and then it becomes existing in the future year.
The good thing about the scale is it's heading down, except for 2022 when it goes up again to support the facilities for Fire Station number 1. But outside of that, we're servicing the debt properly and bringing it down.
Tax increment financing districts, those finance plans are in your budget book towards the end in pages 247 to 254. Those plans are more long-term looking plans. And we really just have the 2 active districts right now, TIF District 6 and for the heart of the city, and District 7 in the MRQ. These budgets are adopted as a total for the grand plan for the TIF for the entire district. So we are giving you a longer term view on those. They're not annual budgets. But we are showing you in those plans our expectation for 2018. The state does not actually require us to do the TIF districts in your annual budget process, but we add those in there to be as transparent as possible. So that all of the funds that we have for the city are included in your 2018 budget. TIF District 6 was established in 2002, and it will decertify in 2019. So that one is coming towards its end. It's generating about $850,000 of tax increment in 2018 is what we're expecting. And we've used that for public improvements and outstanding PAYGO developer payments. So in 2019, that tax base comes back online to the general tax.
Question,
Councilmember.
Acting Mayor. The final statement, use of funds is for debt service. Okay, so what's the 1.5 million of outstanding bonds for public improvements? What is it that, the 1.5 million in
It's
debt services?
the street improvements that
Okay.
were done in that area.
Gotcha, and 3.2 million. So are you saying that's the total serviceable debt, but the 850,000 is what we will see come onto our
Yes.
books where we keep it rather than redistribute it back to the TIF? Right now, is that 850 already committed or earmarked for something in particular?
Yes, it is. So the debt service was structured for the Performing Arts Center to increase in the year that the Heart of the City TIF district was decertified. So, or will be decertified. So the debt service increases and the tax levy goes to the general tax levy. So it won't be an increase that would be felt by the property tax owners in that year.
I remember when TIF District 2 decertified and we had that 1.2 million, whatever it was, it made it look like we had this huge tax increase when actually it was just the way we have to report that is like a tax increase, basically. But, and I know that we all unanimously put all that money to our ITF to continue to
Yes.
replace and repair our very old streets. So, okay, so none of the 850 will be able to be used for anything because all of it is already predefined to fall into the debt service for the Ames Center.
At this time, it's hard to predict exactly how much will be available of the 850. But we expect that some of it will offset general property taxes. But we don't know. It depends on what the valuation of that property is in 2 years, so.
Yep. How much, then we must know exactly how much was committed to on the plan for that debt service, that increase? Was it 600,000 or 700,000 or?
Off the top of my head, I don't have that number, but we can get back to you.
City Manager.
Councilmember Keeley, members of the council, I think generally speaking, it's an offsetting right now, and so that's generally what we can have. We can certainly look up the exact number, but we found that we could service that debt earlier, and the council was noted, does have to act to increase that, and so the plan is to do that for the debt service, so. If you wanted to spend it on something else, you would then again have to increase the
Right, yeah,
levy.
it's offset. I just
Yeah.
was the original plan back when we planned the financing for the Ames Center, when this decertified in this year, was it 850 was expected?
I think we expected
forecasted.
more, but I think we expected more, and so that's why
Okay.
you see other sources of funding for the Ames Center debt going in. So you see, when it was originally done, we thought there would be more coming from this district.
Right.
There, in fact, is a lot less, and that's why we have some general levy going in there as well.
General levy, that's helping to fund it. Okay.
Correct.
Development slowed down quite a bit right after that.
Yeah. Yes, it did in a big way. Thank you.
And TIF District 7, that one, there isn't any increment right now or expenditures at this point in time, so. So the other thing we've included in this presentation are just some comparison information for you, just as a reference. Where is Burnsville compared to similar-sized cities and other Dakota County cities? So as far as the levy increase goes for 2018, when you compare to market cities and other comparable cities of our size, suburban cities, we are at 3.9. We are the green. So you can see that we are on the low end in comparison to other similar cities this year. When you compare to other Dakota County cities, so we compare to all the cities, or the larger cities in
in Dakota County because they have the same kinds of factors that are related to the county. And we are right there at the low end for that as well, so.
Councilmember Keeley.
This was probably the most smile-creating chart that I've seen in a while, and it really does, as much as we wrestle with the budget and we battle and we debate on how we can save money, and you know my stance is 2% on existing taxpayers. We're about 3% when you back out TIF and new growth, so we're a point above that. Had we shaved that point off, we would have been the lowest in Dakota County, and we would have been just barely above the lowest in all of the market cities. But having said that, where we're at today, we are very low compared to all the comparable market cities, which is probably a better chart to compare because it's market city sizes are more like us, even though they might be in a different county. In Dakota County cities, you've got quite a wide diversity of different sizes and developments within cities, like Rosemont's not very well developed, for instance. But to sit there at 3.88, having Apple Valley be the only one below this on the Dakota County cities, or at 3.88 on the other chart, although it says 3.9. To have all these other market cities at 4.5%, 5%, 6%, 8%, 7%, 8%, all the way up to 11.5%. Hats off to the staff and being very frugal and controlling costs and looking for savings and keeping us down in that very high value, low tax position. Over the last few years, I've heard more comments about people who've moved here said, I moved here because I found the taxes were low, like our city compared to other cities. And this chart just validates those comments. So thank you.
One thing I should add to this, these are the max tax proposed, so they can come down from here with the other cities too, but this is what they certified as max.
Well, there's they got a long way to go at the other end of that chart to get anywhere within realistic reason.
Well, also, they may have a permit situation better, the same, or less than ours. Ours will benefit some, but some of those other cities might have a significant other benefit, so.
Yep, there are definitely a lot of factors that go into that comparison. It's just one factor, different choices that they make. Taxable market value. In Dakota County, we are the third largest within the county. Egan having the most taxable market value, and Lakeville is ahead of us now. So we are on the high end of that.
Councilmember Keeling.
That is a very good thing, though. This is the chart where we want to have a larger
Yes.
taxable piece of pie. So this is the reverse of what we just talked about with having a sizable taxable market value helps spread the cost of everything around.
And then as you look at what makes up that market value, that Egan has 1.9 billion to get the right term in commercial and industrial as compared to Burnsville's 1.5. But as you look at Lakeville, who has a total more than Burnsville, they have less commercial and industrial. So it's just some information. That's all we're trying to point out there is how many things and different factors affect the property tax levy.
Appreciate it.
And then I think I thought this was interesting as well as how did the market value increase in 2017 for the 2018 pay, and we were second highest in the amount that the market value increased. However, new construction, we are one of the lower amounts of new construction. So what you're seeing is that our existing properties are going up while our faster than some of our other neighboring cities. This one is where do we sit median home value wise compared to other cities? So even though we're on the left end of the chart for total value, the median home value is in the middle compared to those other cities. And then if you calculate the tax on the median home value in each of those cities, the tax rate for those cities, Burnsville is the second lowest within the county on that too. So that's a new calculation that we did this year.
Councilmember Keely.
Thank you very much. This is a great chart. This is the chart that some of those folks that were complimenting our low tax structure might have looked at, or something similar to this, and found that we were a very, inexpensive city to live in, and yet you look around, and I think we compare well to our neighboring cities as far as the quality of the streets, the quality of the parks, the quality of our assets.
So that leads us into the discussion portion of the evening. From the November 14th meeting, we already had these questions. And so the first one was, does the council have direction regarding the magnitude of the future tax levies or reductions to pursue? And the consensus was to proceed as proposed. Proceed in preparing a 3.9% increase for the total 2018 tax levy. Proceed as proposed is what we get. And then does the council want to spread the increase of the forestry fund over future years? And we went with, the consensus was to proceed with one increase in 2018. That was an earlier discussion point. Do you council support the use of fund balance as proposed? And that was yes. And does the council support the financial policy changes as proposed? And that also was yes. So tonight's
I just want to make something clear that as long as there are two council members missing, that we not discuss those tonight. We can discuss them at a later time. The other two members can watch this and then enter their opinion at an appropriate time when five of us are here. City Manager.
Councilmember Acting Mayor Coughlin, certainly that makes sense. I just do want to make sure that everyone does know that because we were able to get the slides out early, we did sit down with Mayor Couts and Councilmember Schultz, so they have already seen the presentation as well. So I wanna
Right,
make
so
sure that
then they'll
folks
be
are aware.
ready to give their opinion when we're all together next at the appropriate time.
Maybe they can tweet it into us. We can incorporate it into
But
our
that's
discussion.
not a proper,
Acting Mayor Coughlin, if you'd like to give us the sense of the three of you, then we can certainly, but we won't take that as direction if that's the will of the council. But I don't know if anyone has any comments for us so that we can, plan for the
Councilmember
next
Gustafson.
meeting.
Well, we've been talking about this pedestrian bridge since 2005 and probably earlier than that. And I know, talking to MnDOT at 35 Solutions, they have some discussions on that as well as what may happen down in that area. So I think that's something we should definitely pursue.
100% behind it. We've been talking about that since I went on council 11 years ago, and it is there's two areas where I believe that there's a pedestrian bridge required, at the high school and at Nicollet. And if we can get federal funding and get one done because of the future planned orange stop on the south side of 13 with the existing, transit station on the north side, to me, this is, thank goodness we have an option, and hopefully we can get the federal funding. I would have supported 100%.
as to those two questions, and limited to that, I would support both those as well. And I am not making a comment as to whether there should be one by the high school or not, just the two questions before us.
And then, just as an overall, does the council support the proposed capital improvements plan as presented?
Councilmember Gustafson.
I support it.
Councilmember Keely.
100%. Thank you. It's a great presentation. It was very well done. Thank you.
As do I.
Great. So,
Councilmember Gustafson.
Before we move on, can you go back to the city tax on medium home values? I do like the fact that we're at the second lowest in the county, but I look at Egan, who has been spending a tremendous amount of money on investing in their city and has been raising their levies at a pace to keep up with that investment, has been able to expand their tax base to the point where they can still get all that stuff done and have the lowest tax in the county. And I think that's something that we should all be thinking about going into 2018.
Projects on that vacant land.
Thank you.
whoops, one too far. So your next meeting is December 5th, and that is when you consider the budget adoption. The meeting starts at 5:30. The budget adoption will need to be at 6:30 or later, so within that meeting. And that is because of the TNT publication and actual rules. It has to be after 6 o'clock, so that's where that is. You can go on, the public can go on to burnsville.org/budget to view the previous presentations. The virtual budget open house is posted out there, as well as the full budget workbook. And in this presentation, we do have at the top of most pages or most of the slides, the page numbers that the more detail is included in. So if you really want to dive into it, there's lots of opportunity to do so. So that is all I have for this evening.
I'd like to thank all the staff for their hard work in preparing the budget, and CIP, you did a great job, and thank you to the city manager of helping coordinate this. Councilmember Gustafson,
I'm good, thank you.
Councilmember Keeley.
No further comment.
Members of the council, there are no additional items to come before us tonight. We are adjourned by acclamation, and thank you for being with us, and good night.